It rarely arrives as a slap. It slips in as a whisper, a joke that hangs in the air just a second too long, a tone shift you can feel in your bones, a smile with teeth behind it. Most people wave it off. Not worth the energy, they tell themselves. Then it shows up again louder, bolder, in front of an audience. By the time they decide to respond, the damage is done. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Disrespect ignored is disrespect approved. Machiavelli grasped this centuries ago. In any arena obsessed with status, workplace, family, friend groups, online, respect isn't a merit badge you collect. It's a boundary you enforce. The moment someone tests that boundary, your response teaches everyone else how to treat you from that day forward. Disrespect, especially early on, is rarely personal. It's a probe. It's a push to see what you'll allow. Fail that test and you're not just labeled nice. You're labeled safe. Safe to overlook. Safe to talk over. Safe to mock. So when it happens, when someone slides that barb across the table, your move is immediate. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Immediate. You go quiet, but not compliant. This is the first Machiavellian principle for handling disrespect. The person who erupts loses status. The person who withdraws attention becomes unreadable. Unreadable is powerful. Unreadable creates uncertainty. And uncertainty, especially in social hierarchies, feels a lot like fear. Silence doesn't mean pretending you didn't hear it. Silence means you stop feeding the moment. No nervous laugh. No over-explanation. No, hey, I know you didn't mean it. You let the energy die in your eyes, in your posture, in your refusal to keep the rhythm going. Think of it like a hard stop in a song, a beat of blackness the other person didn't plan for. Disrespect feeds on reaction, your defensiveness, your appeasement, your need to smooth things over. When you give them a void instead, their move looks exactly like what it is, a cheap grab for dominance. Machiavelli rarely struck first. He watched. He let opponents overextend, reveal their hand, believe they were safe. Then he moved, never apologetically, always precisely. That's your second step. Mirror the violation back, not with an insult, but with a question that forces daylight onto their behavior. Hold the gaze. Tilt your head a fraction. Keep your tone calm enough to chill the room. Then, did you mean to say it like that? Or, want to repeat that? Or, that sounded personal. Want to clarify before I respond? Each question is a scalpel. You're not denying the shot. You're offering them the chance to put it on the record, to double down publicly, to make their intent explicit where everyone can see it. Most won't, because most people who poke at you aren't brave. They're opportunistic. They test boundaries the way pickpockets test zippers lightly, quickly, hoping you won't notice. When you meet that test with quiet tension and surgical clarity, doubt blooms. And doubt is your objective, not revenge, not a grand takedown, not a perfect one-liner. Doubt. The person who plants doubt in others doesn't beg for respect. They emit it. They make people hesitate, choose words more carefully, correct themselves mid-sentence. Now, let's go deeper. A single crisp moment, anyone can manage. The real game is consistency. Handle the first shot well, good. But if the door stays cracked, if you soften a week later, if your posture returns to old patterns, they'll try again. So step 3 is non-negotiable. Reframe the relationship immediately. You don't snap back to normal. You redraw the map. Your language sharpens, straight lines, no padding. Your availability narrows. No last-minute favors, no extra warmth, no automatic access. If the slight was public, your new posture should be public too. a quiet broadcast that travels farther than any comeback could. You don't announce the shift. You let them feel it when their jokes die in your silence, when your replies are crisp and short, when the casual familiarity they enjoyed evaporates. That's the difference between people who are merely liked and people who are respected. It's not about bulldozing, it's about principle. You're saying, in the clearest way possible, I'm not available for that, and you refuse to decorate that boundary with comfort so they feel better about crossing it. And watch what happens next. The social current bends. Others take note. Your name gets handled with calculation instead of carelessness. Invitations come with more courtesy. People stop tossing things in your direction just to see. Because the person who cannot be disrespected isn't the loudest in the room. They're the one whose attention is earned, not assumed. From here, understand something crucial. Boundary testers don't usually come back with the same tactic. They return with subtler probes. A joke that lands softer. An oversight that conveniently excludes you. A compliment that tastes like poison when you swallow it. They're looking for your tele-twitch, a flinch. Any sign you'll trade respect for belonging. That's where your next lever comes in. Disproportionate consequence. And yes, the word disproportionate makes modern ears twitch. But Machiavelli wasn't designing a morality tale. He was designing for outcomes. If the consequence equals the offense, it fades. If the consequence exceeds it cleanly, calmly, without theatrics, it becomes a story they repeat. A story that travels ahead of you. Wait, you might ask, isn't that petty? Not if you deliver it without heat. Not if your motive isn't punishment, but instruction. The message is simple. You don't get to play with me twice, so if they try again, you don't go louder, you go colder. If the second shot happens publicly, your correction is public but precise. They throw a comment? You pause, meet their eyes for a beat, then turn to the rest of the group and continue as if the noise never mattered. They ask you a question? You answer with one measured sentence and shift your attention away. They reach for your warmth. You offer the social equivalent of a closed door, polite, professional, distant, not aggression. Removal. That hurts more than any insult. People can shrug off being snapped at. They struggle with being denied access. The door that used to open doesn't, and they feel the draft of their own exclusion. This is where many people collapse. They want to be seen as the bigger person. They want to tidy the room. They believe forgiving earns admiration. Machiavelli would smirk. Respect, in practice, is built on predictable consequence, not performative mercy. You don't rage, you don't rant, you don't grovel for harmony. You execute your boundary and move on. Meanwhile, the room is watching. People always are. They witnessed the first jab. They clocked your stillness. Now they're evaluating. Will you hold? Will you wobble? Will you apologize for making others uncomfortable? This is your image-forging moment. And Machiavelli was blunt about image. It often matters more than the buried truth. Your post-conflict image becomes either armor or exposure. You want your silence to carry a message others repeat for you. He doesn't entertain that. She disengages when disrespected. You get one shot. Once those phrases attach to your name, the air around you changes. Jokes soften. Words get edited before they reach you. Introductions start including terms like sharp, no nonsense, focused. You didn't demand those labels. You trained the room to use them. But not everyone recalibrates. Some people don't live on approval. They live on disruption. They want your reaction the way a gambler wants the next spin. When they meet someone like you still, disciplined, unwilling to dance, they either retreat or escalate. If they escalate, You don't match emotion. You escalate position. You leverage their move against them. When they try to drag you into chaos, you don't meet them there. You rise above it. You turn their own behavior into their exposure. If they want to be loud, you hand them the microphone and let them destroy themselves with it. You stay calm, detached, almost amused. And then, precisely, you start using questions or remarks that throw a mirror in their face. That's an interesting joke. Do you use that one at work too? Or, if you talk to your friends like that, I can't imagine how you talk to strangers. Or, I'm surprised you said that out loud. You're not arguing. You're reframing the stage. You're making the audience see what they were trying to hide. This is Machiavellian retaliation, not vengeance, but leverage. It's not a sword. It's a spotlight. You're not raising your voice. You're raising awareness. And the result? Their power shrinks under the weight of their own words. Because most aggressors rely on one thing: your emotional reaction. They want to shift attention from what they did to how you reacted. But when you stay poised and analytical, when you let their disrespect hang there in silence, everyone sees it for what it is: small, weak, transparent. That's how you begin turning their disrespect into your elevation. You don't crush them. You let them collapse themselves. Calmly, elegantly, publicly. And here's the beauty of that move. You never look like the aggressor. You look like the one who held composure. You look like the adult in the room. That's how you gain influence without lifting a finger. Now, let's take this further. Disrespect doesn't thrive on courage. It thrives on safety. People test you because they think you won't respond. They mock you because they believe you'll laugh it off. They push because they assume you won't push back. The disrespect isn't about confidence. It's about the assumption of your passivity. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. Power isn't about striking often. It's about creating the sense that you could. You build the image that, at any moment, you might respond in a way no one expects. That uncertainty becomes your reputation. It's not about fear. It's about strategic unpredictability. You don't need to make threats. You just need to stop being predictable. When people can no longer predict your response, they start watching their own behavior. That's the pivot. Your goal isn't to make them afraid, it's to make them uncertain. Did they go too far? Why didn't you react? What are you thinking? That's where the power is. Because uncertainty forces respect faster than any confrontation ever will. From now on, your silence becomes your sword. You don't speak to fill space. You don't rush to explain. You don't defend your boundaries. They're self-evident. The quieter you become, the more others project meaning onto your stillness. They'll start asking themselves questions you don't even have to answer. Did I offend them? Why did their mood change? Did I lose their trust? They'll manage their behavior for you. This is how presence is built, not by dominating every moment, but by mastering the energy in every room you enter. You don't talk as much as others. You observe more. You listen longer than is comfortable. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. That's Machiavellian discipline. The restraint to let silence do the heavy lifting. See, most people confuse respect with likability. They think if everyone smiles when they enter the room, that's respect. It's not. Respect begins when people feel the weight of your presence, even when you say nothing. It's in the pause before they interrupt you, the lowered tone when they speak your name, the shift in posture when you look at them. That's respect. It's not earned by being nice. It's enforced through energy. And that energy is built on contradiction. You don't always react, but when you do, it's surgical. You don't seek to dominate, but you never tolerate being crossed. You don't need to demand respect, because you remove access the moment it's violated. That's how your energy becomes a warning, not a threat, but a consequence waiting quietly behind composure. At this point, the game evolves. You stop seeing disrespect as a personal attack. You start seeing it as data. Every jab, every passive-aggressive comment, every "just kidding" that lands wrong, those are signals. They're not insults to absorb. They're intel to use. Most people hear an insult and feel pain. You hear it and think, there's their insecurity, there's their jealousy, there's their need for control. You start seeing through the behavior instead of reacting to it. You stop taking it personally because you realize it never was. It was always about them, never about you. That's when you separate yourself from the average person. You no longer fight for respect, you diagnose it. You observe patterns, you identify motives, and then you make choices. Who still gets access to me? Who gets quiet distance? Who gets erased from my world entirely? Because here's what Machiavelli really taught about power. It's not about reacting emotionally. It's about orchestrating position. You're not playing checkers, you're playing chess. Each silence, each calm stare, each boundary is a move that rearranges the board. The best position is one where people fear violating your boundary, even when you're not there. That's when you've truly won. Not when they apologize, not when they flatter you, but when your absence carries the same weight as your presence. The people who never get disrespected aren't loud or aggressive. They've just made disrespect too expensive. And how do you make it expensive? Not through anger, not through revenge, through discipline. You hold your frame. You don't flinch. You make others realize that crossing you once costs access forever. That's the essence of power in Machiavelli's world and in yours. Because when you move with that kind of energy, people adjust. They pause before making that joke. They reconsider the tone of that text. Their body language shifts when you enter the room. You can feel the recalibration, not because you threaten them, but because your energy has become a standard. That's not arrogance. That's self-enforcement. Now, let's be clear. The goal isn't to live in cold hostility. The goal is selective openness. Your warmth becomes a choice, not a default. You smile when you want to. You engage when it's earned. You let people close when they've proven they won't take it for granted. You move from, "I hope they like me," to, "I'll decide if they get access." And that shift, right there, is where most people lose the old version of you. The version that over-explained. The version that laughed at things that weren't funny. The version that mistook tolerance for strength. That person is gone. What replaces them is calm, deliberate, and quietly intimidating. And here's the twist Machiavelli would love. Power built through subtraction lasts longer than power built through performance. You subtract neediness, overexposure, reactivity. You subtract the habit of over-explaining. You subtract the need to prove that you're the good one. Every subtraction increases your value. That's why people start repeating your words later. That's why they don't interrupt you. That's why they measure their tone. Because you've stopped chasing respect and started embodying it. You've become the standard. But even with this shift, there's one brutal truth Machiavelli never sugarcoated. Men must be either respected or eliminated. Translated to today, it means people either recognize your value or they lose access to it. That's not cruelty. It's calibration. The ones who disrespect you once and learn from it aren't the problem. They're the example. The ones who do it again, subtly, manipulatively, don't deserve correction. They deserve silence. Total, unwavering, unbreakable silence. Because disappearance is the most powerful statement you can make. When you remove access, you remove oxygen. And in that vacuum, they realize what they lost. You don't need revenge. You just need to keep rising while they fade into irrelevance. That's when the world begins to shift around you. You no longer chase. You no longer react. You no longer feel the need to defend what you've already made untouchable. And that's where we'll continue next. How silence itself becomes your final weapon, and how mercy, when delivered cold, becomes more terrifying than punishment. Now we reach the final layer of control, the kind of power that doesn't shout or strike, but simply decides. Because at some point, someone who disrespected you will realize they went too far. Maybe they'll try to apologize. Maybe they'll joke around again to test if the ice is melted. Maybe they'll act like nothing happened, hoping you'll play along. And this, right here, is the moment that defines your legacy. You don't punish them. You don't forgive them. You do something far colder and far more powerful. You remain unchanged. Because when you've made your point, when the disrespect has already exposed them and elevated you, there's nothing left to prove. They already know. Mercy without warmth becomes your final message. You are no longer a threat to me. That's the Machiavellian version of mercy. It's not softness, it's dominance wrapped in calm. It says, "You've fallen so far beneath my concern that I don't even need to retaliate." And that message, delivered through silence and composure, echoes longer than any speech ever could. So when they come back, laughing nervously, apologizing too much, trying to act casual, you don't respond with hostility. You don't seek revenge. You let them walk around in the new reality you've created. A world where your attention is no longer guaranteed, where your energy no longer bends to meet theirs, where you exist above the noise they once thrived on. That's not pettiness. That's power by absence. Because nothing shakes a manipulative person more than realizing they never had any real hold over you. That their attempt to disrespect you didn't wound you. It revealed them. They wanted a reaction, and instead they met a void. They tried to lower your frame and ended up exposing their own. That's when they finally understand that they never had control to begin with. And while they're busy wondering if you're still upset, you're already 2 levels ahead. Calmer, sharper, more focused, more respected. Because in silence, you've built something few people ever master. Selective presence. People start whispering about it, not out of gossip, but reverence. He doesn't say much, but when he does, everyone listens. She never loses her cool. You don't want to cross that one. They don't come back around. That's your new reputation, not because of theatrics, but because of restraint, because of how you carry yourself in conflict, because of how you don't react. You've trained the world to handle you with calculation, not comfort. And that's where true authority begins. You're no longer chasing validation, you're commanding energy. From this point on, every interaction becomes a test, not of your words, but of your consistency. You'll notice people double-checking their tone before speaking to you. You'll see them rewording sentences mid-conversation. They'll become cautious, not out of fear, but because your energy has weight. That's what Machiavelli meant by image over truth. People don't respect your internal virtue. They respect what your conduct makes them feel. You can have the purest heart in the world, but if your boundaries are weak, your presence feels light. And in power dynamics, lightness gets crushed. So you build weight, not through aggression, but through certainty. Certainty in your tone. Certainty in your pauses. Certainty in your silence. When you move with that level of composure, people start adjusting themselves around you automatically. That's when you know you've stopped playing the social game and started playing the power game. And the key rule of the power game is this: you never fight for respect again. You design a world where respect becomes the default response. That means no over-explaining, no nervous laughter, no defending your decisions to people who've already shown they don't deserve access. Your self-worth isn't up for negotiation. Your time isn't a public service. Your attention isn't free. You stop reacting to disrespect as if it's about you. You start treating it like weather, something that reveals the environment, not your worth. If it rains, you don't yell at the sky. You just move accordingly. That's power in motion. That's Machiavellian mastery. And here's what's wild. Once you reach that level of composure, people start to feel your presence differently. You'll walk into a room and the energy will shift. Conversations quiet. Eyes flick toward you, not because you're intimidating, but because you've trained the room to recognize gravity when it enters. That's what true presence feels like. Not noise, but weight. Machiavelli would call it the aura of inevitability. When people sense that your silence isn't submission but calculation, that your calm isn't comfort but control, they begin to treat you like a force of nature rather than a peer. They stop trying to provoke you because they no longer know what happens if they do. And that's the secret. Power thrives on uncertainty. The people around you must never know exactly where your limit lies. Not because you're cruel, but because predictability breeds weakness. A person whose every emotion can be guessed is a person who can be manipulated. So you stay unreadable, controlled, quietly strategic. The less you reveal, the more others reveal themselves around you. You'll start noticing how quickly people fill silence. They'll over-explain. They'll apologize unnecessarily. They'll try to win back your warmth, but you won't need to say a word. Your lack of reaction will do all the speaking for you. And that's when you've reached the final level of psychological dominance. Not through cruelty or ego, but through control. Control over your reactions, your energy, and most importantly, your accessibility. Because they can't disrespect what they can't reach. They can't undermine someone who doesn't rely on their approval. They can't provoke silence that's built on certainty. At this point, you become untouchable, not because you fight harder, but because you've mastered the art of detachment. You've realized that power doesn't come from being invincible. It comes from being unavailable to pettiness. That's why Machiavelli said rulers must either be respected or eliminated. In modern terms, it means people either recognize your value or they remove themselves. You don't chase, you don't explain, and you don't beg for understanding. You let time and silence make your point for you, and as that happens, your reputation transforms from something you defend into something that defends you. People start saying things like, "You only cross them once," or "They don't waste time arguing." Your absence becomes more impactful than most people's presence. And that's the point. Because the person who cannot be disrespected isn't the loudest. They're the one whose attention has become a privilege. So let them wonder. Let them speculate about what you'll do next. You don't need to confirm or deny anything. The mystery is part of the power. Because they already know if they cross the line, you won't argue. You won't chase. You won't even explain. You'll just disappear, and that silence will echo longer than any insult they could ever throw your way. That's how you finish the game quietly, completely, and permanently. That's how you stop reacting to disrespect and start commanding reality. The most dangerous thing you can ever do is try to prove your worth to someone who's already decided to disrespect it. That's the trap most people fall into. They think if they just explain themselves better, stay calm enough, or forgive fast enough, they'll somehow earn respect back. But here's the Machiavellian truth. Once you have to explain your value, it's already been discounted. So when someone disrespects you, you don't rush to restore the balance. You let the imbalance expose them. You let their behavior echo in silence long enough for the room to see what it really was. Because when you stop chasing fairness, you gain something stronger: influence. Most people think influence comes from persuasion, charm, or dominance. It doesn't. It comes from control. Control over your reactions, your tone, and your accessibility. The more unpredictable you become, the more people regulate themselves around you. That's power. And Machiavelli would remind you, power built on restraint is 10 times stronger than power built on aggression. That's why you never respond right away. You give silence time to ferment. The world rushes to fill silence with excuses, explanations, and apologies. But you stay still. You let the weight of your quietness speak for you. Here's the paradox. The quieter you become, the louder your presence feels. People start sensing that your calm isn't confusion, it's calculation. That your lack of words doesn't mean weakness. It means you're choosing which words will land like blades when you finally decide to speak. And that's where respect begins to rewire itself. Because respect isn't something people give you. It's something they feel when your energy forces them to. The person who commands a room doesn't always speak first. They shift the air just by existing in it. They sit back, observe, and let others reveal themselves. They make silence uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, everyone else adjusts. You've probably seen it before. A leader walks into a meeting, says almost nothing, and everyone straightens their posture. No yelling, no authority badge, no loud presence, just stillness. That's the essence of Machiavellian presence. It's not what you say. It's what others feel when you stop talking. And once people start feeling you instead of hearing you, the entire dynamic changes. They start second-guessing themselves before crossing you. They start watching your eyes for clues. They start craving your approval, not because you demanded it, but because you withheld it. Withholding is the art modern people have forgotten. Everyone overshares, over-explains, overreacts. But Machiavellian discipline means understanding this. What's rare becomes sacred. The rarer your attention, the more valuable it becomes. The rarer your reactions, the more powerful they appear. So stop being constantly available. Stop offering your time, your emotion, your presence to anyone who hasn't earned it. When you treat your energy like a resource, not a reflex, you become someone people protect, not someone they test. But let's go deeper. Sometimes, disrespect doesn't come from enemies. It comes from familiarity. People get used to your kindness, your reliability, your patience. And familiarity breeds carelessness. They start forgetting what it costs to access you. That's why you must occasionally remind them, not with words, but with distance. Machiavelli understood that the ruler who is always present becomes invisible. The same is true for you. Constant exposure dilutes your gravity. Absence, however, magnifies it. So disappear strategically. Step back when people begin taking you for granted. Make your silence felt. Don't announce the reason. Let them think about it. Because absence isn't just retreat, it's recalibration. It teaches others to value your presence again. And the moment they start wondering where you went, that's when your respect doubles in value. Now, some will notice your shift and panic. They'll try to pull you back in with charm or guilt. You've changed, they'll say. You're acting distant. That's fine. Let them talk. You have changed. You've stopped rewarding disrespect with attention. You've stopped treating access to you like a right. You've stopped performing emotional labor for people who haven't earned it. This isn't coldness. It's sovereignty. It's the realization that your peace is more valuable than anyone's comfort. And here's where the final layer of the game begins. Once you've mastered silence, distance, and control, your power stops being reactive and becomes perceptual. Meaning, you no longer need to prove that you're strong. People assume it. They feel it in how you move, how you pause, how you don't react. Your boundaries become psychological. People censor themselves in your presence, not because you ask them to, but because your energy demands it. That's the apex of Machiavellian influence. You don't command through words. You command through calibration. The room shifts around you. And what's fascinating is this. When you hold this kind of posture, people respect you even in your absence. They measure their words when your name comes up. They defend your reputation in rooms you've never entered. Because you've built something they instinctively don't want to lose your approval. At this stage, you no longer enforce boundaries, you embody them. But remember this. Every boundary you enforce once must be maintained forever. The moment you relax it, people test it again. Respect has a half-life. It decays if not reinforced. So stay consistent. The same silence, the same clarity, the same composure every time. Let others fluctuate, you don't. And if someone crosses the line again, don't waste time correcting them. Don't remind them of what they already know. Simply vanish from their world. Not in anger, in indifference. Because disappearance is the purest form of consequence. The beauty of Machiavellian power is that it never looks rushed. It looks inevitable. You don't chase apologies. You don't seek validation. You let time prove your point. Because in time, the same people who disrespected you will end up referencing you, admiring you, even fearing the silence that follows your name. That's what mastery looks like, not dominance, but distance. Not cruelty, but control. And when you move with that kind of energy, something remarkable happens. The world starts reorganizing itself around you. People pause before speaking. They think before joking. They approach you with precision, not carelessness. They treat you like someone whose reaction matters because now it does. That's the quiet power Machiavelli built his philosophy on. Control the perception, and the reality will follow. You no longer have to demand respect. You've made disrespect unthinkable. And the ones who still don't get it? You don't correct them. You don't confront them. You simply leave them standing in the silence they created and never return. There's a moment quiet, almost invisible, when the energy around you changes. The same people who once joked too freely now measure their words. The ones who used to test you hesitate before speaking. That shift doesn't happen by accident. It happens because you've learned to stop reacting, to stop explaining, to stop trying to prove yourself. You've replaced noise with presence. This is the final stage of power, when your silence speaks louder than your defense ever could. When you walk into a room now, you don't try to be noticed, you are noticed. Not because you demand attention, but because your composure commands it. You don't fill silence. You let it work for you. You don't rush to answer. You let people feel the weight of your pause. That's what true respect feels like. It's not earned through charm or kindness. It's built through control. Machiavelli understood that respect is not something people hand you. It's something they sense in your presence. Every choice you make, how you speak, how you hold still, how little you explain, adds to that perception. You've taught others, without saying a word, that your attention is rare, your boundaries are firm, and your energy cannot be taken for granted. At this point, you no longer need to defend your boundaries. You embody them. People recognize the cost of access. They hesitate before testing you because they already know what follows: silence, distance, consequence, and that's what separates the respected from the overlooked. When someone crosses the line now, you don't confront, you don't debate, you simply vanish. No explanations, no warnings, just removal. Because the most painful consequence for a disrespectful person isn't your anger. It's your absence. When your energy disappears, their confidence dissolves with it. They'll tell others you've changed. They'll call you cold, distant, prideful. But deep down, they understand. It's not ego, it's consequence. Machiavelli would call this strategic absence. The ruler who is always available loses influence. The one who appears by choice creates mystery. And mystery always commands more respect than familiarity. That's why you must remain unreadable. The more people can predict you, the easier you are to manipulate. But when they can't tell what you're thinking, when your silence carries uncertainty, they start to regulate themselves. That's the psychological edge Machiavelli built his entire philosophy on. You don't dominate through fear. You lead through unpredictability. Your silence becomes a mirror. People see themselves in it. They start over-explaining, apologizing, trying to earn back your attention. But you don't need to respond. The void you leave behind does the teaching for you. At this level, your reputation does the work. People describe you in phrases that carry weight. They never lose their composure. They don't tolerate nonsense. They don't come back once you cross them. And that's exactly what you want. Because perception is power. The image people hold of you becomes a shield that works even when you're not in the room. This is the final transformation Machiavelli spoke of. The shift from reactive power to symbolic power. You don't fight for respect anymore. You become the standard of it. And from here, your strategy is simple. Maintain distance, stay deliberate, and keep your energy scarce. Not out of bitterness, but out of design. Because what is scarce becomes valuable. The more selective you are, the more powerful your presence becomes. You've moved past needing to be liked. You've moved beyond explaining your worth. You've learned that sometimes silence hurts more than any comeback, and absence speaks louder than confrontation ever could. And that's why, when people talk about you now, there's always a note of caution in their voice. They respect what they can't control. They fear what they can't predict. They admire what they can't replace. That's the Machiavellian ideal, not revenge, not dominance, but control. You've turned your discipline into your defense, your distance into your statement, your silence into your legacy. So when someone crosses you again, you won't argue. You won't prove. You won't explain. You'll simply disappear, and that silence will echo longer than anything you could ever say.